Finance of the State Bar of California. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. Tenny, can I get you to call the roll, please?
Yes. Buenaventura?
Present.
Good, not present. Soel?
Present.
Tony?
Present.
Trejo?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Welcome, Finance Committee members, those that are in attendance. Next on the agenda is the call for public comment. The State Bar staff will attempt to try to call participants in the order in which they appear. For those of you participating by Zoom, please use the raise hand function, and you will be put into the queue. For those of you who may be calling in, please use the *9 function, and that will get you in the queue for public comment. And generally, due to time restrictions, we try to keep public comment to about 3 minutes. And I just ask, Tenny, do we have anybody in the queue for public comment?
Yes, we have a Benjamin Cohn.
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
Mr. Cohn, you're recognized for 3 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to discuss a vendor issue, vendor form site, which runs your public comment portal. It's a number of commenters on the testing accommodations rules revision had several issues with the reliability of this vendor, and they maybe should not be given future contracts. One of the issues was that it did not meet the website accessibility criteria under regulations for visual disabilities. Several people had difficulty commenting in the portal for that reason. Second problem was that it lost comments that were submitted. Some of those comments that were submitted by email and portal were discovered after the fact as missing from a public records release that I had gotten, but some number of people who only commented via the portal, those comments are now considered not received timely by the State Bar, even though the commenter understands that they submitted timely. And that is a very big issue for public comment. Second, with regard to this budget amendment, it seems like the Public Records Office is not receiving further staffing, but other offices is. I see that as somewhat problematic because the timeliness of public record releases is critical to making public comments that are effective. I had a public records that I wanted for the rules revision comments that I requested way back in May. All the responsive records have been identified in early June, but alleged to be exempt, but then you agreed to reconsider in June for an ETA of late July, which would have been in time for the deadline, but that ETA was extended into late August at the last minute. And as a result, it's precisely tailored to now to not come until after the August 18 CBE meeting, let alone in time for this July 31 comment deadline. That timing to me seems pretty suspicious, but if it was about staff capacity, then that should be a priority under this budget amendment for additional staff resources. Thank you.
Mr. Cohn, appreciate your commentary, and clearly we will take your thoughts and recommendations as it relates to the Public Records Division under advisement and during our deliberations as we move forward. And thank you for your comments. Tenny, we have others that may be in the queue for public comment?
No, there are no other members of the public who wish to speak at this time.
Okay, very good. I think next on the agenda is the chair's report, and I think all I would just like to let members know is that the flow of the meeting today is that we're going to go into closed session. Obviously, there are some very sort of critical financial matters that the committee needs to consider to then make some recommendations onto the full board. Then we'll come back into open session to consider some of the budget amendments, and then that'll close us out for today. And so unless other committee members may have any comments or questions, I will read what it is I need to read in order for us to go into closed session. And Louisa, has that link been sent to members yet?
I will send it right now.
Yeah, and Mr. Buenaventura, thank you so much for your participation, because I know that you're calling in and you have some court duties today as well.
You're welcome.
So the announcement for us to go into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126C, subsection 7, the Finance Committee will move to closed session to consider the items listed on the closed session agenda. And with that, members, we'll see you in closed session.
Anything?
Yes, I've resumed recording.
Very good. The Finance Committee has concluded its closed session, and at this time have no reportable actions that took place in the closed session. For those that are listening, we will take a, why don't we call it? We need to take a short recess, and we'll come back at 10:15. At 10:15. All righty. So we will come back at 10:15. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Buenaventura.
Great.
Alrighty. Thank you, everyone. The Finance Committee is back in open session. We do have an item of business before us, an action item, and that is approval of the proposed 2023 General Fund Budget Amendment. And that item will be presented by our CFO, Ms. Montoya Chico.
Thank you, Arnie. I have a few slides that I'm going to share. So I'm going to share my screen, and if you could please let me know once you see it. In presentation mode, that would be great. Is my screen up?
We can see it.
You can see it? Great.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So this item is the proposed 2023 amendments to the general fund. I'm going to go through a couple of slides and also go into a little bit of detail on some of the budget amendments that are documented in the agenda item. So I'll start really quick with kind of a high level overview of what the amendments, what the impact of the amendments that I'm proposing are. First of all, the total amendments total about 6.6 million in terms of additional expenditures adding to the general fund. This is basic, it's 6.6 million. In the agenda item, you'll see that it says an increase in to the general fund of 4.7 million. And I just want to highlight, since I've really left it out, that 6.6 million is being offset by approximately 1.9 million in higher revenues we received from primarily licensee fees. So it's an additional revenue we did earn for 2023, and I'm offsetting that against the 6.6 million. So that's the net 4.7 you see in the agenda item. So I wanted to clarify that point. There's also two options that I'm going to go into a little bit of detail. One includes an adjustment to the salaries from the one includes an adjustment without the salary vacancy rate that we've originally incorporated into the budget of 15%. And another amendment suggestion is to actually adopt that change in vacancy rate from 15 to 8%. And I'll go into more details on that particular item. One of the items that I'm also going to go into is an amendment to include the adjustment to fund our vacation accruals. Historically, we had not budgeted this at all into our anytime we've adopted a budget. However, at year end, come the end of our fiscal year, we do add those expenditures into our actual. So I'm recommending that we do not do this any longer as a practice going forward, just because it doesn't really give an accurate picture or the financial condition of the state bar. So as you will see in my subsequent slides, I would like to start including the vacation accrual into the budget rather than just waiting until year end to add those expenditures into the budget. So just as a reminder, what we originally had adopted for the 2023 budget, for the general fund year-end balance, we were projecting about an $8 million reserve level. However, after considering all of the listed amendments that I'm proposing, the balance will either be 3.4 million if we don't adopt the amendment to change the vacation, the salary savings from 15 to 8%, or if we do, if the Finance Committee does want to recommend that for approval, the general fund balance, year-end balance, will be about 400,000. So I want to go really quick through some of the amendments that are in the agenda. I won't go through all of them. I just want to highlight some of the more important ones. I want to highlight the building sale adjustment. We originally adopted a budget without any expenses for the remaining 6 months, meaning from July through December. We didn't budget any expenses of owning the building there. So now that time has by and the building is as of today still unsold, we do need to add those expenditures back into the general fund expenses for the remaining 6 months. I also want to cover moving in the agenda item is item number 5, the public trust liaison. This is an additional expenditure to update their phone tree. This could be considered a discretionary item. I think most of it has not been incurred yet. So something for the board to, not the board, excuse me, the Finance Committee to consider is whether some of these amendments that I'm proposing, if they're discretionary, do we want to go ahead and recommend for approval or not? That's guidance I am seeking from the Finance Committee today. The May investigation expenses and the Odyssey data breach, these are expenditures that we are already over as of June. My numbers here are actually based on June year to date. So May investigation isn't really discretionary considering we did go over about 200,000. So we want to make that adjustment into the budget. Similar for data breach, a portion of it has already been incurred. So which is why I'm proposing an adjustment to true up our actual, true up our budget to actuals. What else did I want to cover? I want to cover the last few items relating to personnel. We under budgeted our CalPERS unfunded actuarial liability. We are overspent as of June, and we're anticipating to be over for the rest of the year by about 600,000. We haven't yet incurred that 600,000 overage, but we are predicting for sure that we are going to be over. In terms of the vacation accruals and the final payroll accrual that's documented as item 11 and 12 on the agenda. As I mentioned, these are typically not budgeted. We have historically not budgeted these amounts, but at the end of the year, we do add all of those expenses that we incurred into the budget at year end. So to make things our actuals to be more aligned with the budget going forward, this is one proposal that I want to make going forward, that we do budget these vacation accruals that will impact our expenditures regardless of when we adopt them. They're going to impact our general fund expenditures. And finally, Item 13 is the inability to meet our vacancy rate. We had previously discussed in meetings that we budgeted 2023 personnel with a 15% vacancy rate. However, based on Q1 and Q2 results, we've actually achieved a vacancy rate closer to 8%. And we don't expect to be able to meet that 15% salary savings. So item 13, the Finance Committee could consider whether we want to also adopt this proposed amendment to actually effectively change our personnel savings from 15 to 8%. And this amendment would include an additional $3 million of expenditures into the general fund. And the table I have in the agenda item has two line items. The first one is what the general fund balance would be if we didn't adopt the salary, this vacancy rate adjustment. And the second line item is what the general fund balance would be at the end of 2023 if we did adopt it. So if we did not adopt any salary adjustments, we're anticipating about a $3.4 million ending fund balance for the general fund. And if we do adopt the salary adjustment, it would be about 400,000. So very, very deep seated. Now moving on really quick to our 2024 projections. We had in the 2023 budget, we always include the following year's forecast. So in that adopted budget, we had included a forecast of 2024 to reflect about $6.5 million in deficit spending. That deficit spending amount of $6.5 million did also include the assumption that we would continue with a 15% vacancy rate. We know that's not the case. We're not able to achieve 15% in 2023, and we don't anticipate being able to continue. We certainly don't anticipate a 15% vacancy rate either in 2024 at all. It also did not include our 2024 deficit spending, did not include any cost for ownership of the building or leasing of the building. So the 2024 projections must be updated to include the ownership of either us continuing to keep the building or the lease of the building. So what the impact to the projections, to the projected projections we made, if you look at my agenda, we're anticipating an increase in the deficit spending by about close to 13 million. And again, this is mostly composed of adding the building expenditures that were not included at all, as well as truing up the salary or personnel expenses and adjust the vacancy rate from the 15 to 8%, as that is, as of the end of Q2, that is probably a more reasonable rate. So what does this mean for the general fund reserve? As I mentioned, depending on what amendments get adopted at the end of 2023, our general fund reserve is either going to be depleted to 3.4 million or about $500,000. That becomes our 2024 beginning balance, general fund balance. However, we have projected deficit spending of about 18 million. Needless to say, that's just insufficient reserves to address that huge gap. So there's a few items that we can consider for addressing the 2024 deficit that we've mentioned before. One, of course, is to obtain a fee increase, which could be possible. The amount, though, will likely be could be capped at what the state auditor recommended, which was about a $24 fee increase for actives. And in terms of dollars, that's only $5 million that would generate for us. However, that $24 increase in active fees, and I think it was $6 for inactives, is just really insufficient to close the funding gap that I mentioned of about $18 million. Again, that $24 did not include any facility costs at all, whether we owned it, whether we leased it, didn't include any of that. It also reflected the assumption that we would have a 15% vacancy rate, which is no longer the case. We've also discussed other possibilities of what we could potentially do to help bridge or make the gap smaller. We have talked about maybe transferring money from other funds. However, this is very limited since we really would need legislative authorization for a couple of the funds that we've identified that could potentially be used to transfer funds into the general fund. We've also discussed that we could reduce certain expenditures in 2024, So for example, deferring some of our other post-employment obligations, also halting some of our debt service payments. And I think that's some of the ideas that some of the potential options that we've thought so far. And that is all of my slides. Happy to answer any questions on any of the amendments listed on here that I'm asking for recommendation to approve to the board.
Before I go to board members for questions, Leah or others, any additional sort of comments that you want to make to augment Ms. Montoya Chica's presentation?
No, other than just to emphasize this kind of inflection point here around the vacancy rate and the 15% versus the 8%, the fact we haven't been able to achieve the 15%, which is actually positive, I think, for our organization in many ways, but not necessarily from a fiscal perspective, and whether or not we're going to kind of true up that cost and reality at this time or postpone doing so. I think that's a really important board decision here at this point, or committee decision.
Thank you for that. I'd like to open up to board members for comments, questions. I do have a few myself, but I want to make sure that other board members, please. Mr. Tony. Mark, you're on mute, I think.
Thank you. I have several comments here. I'll start with the, I had thought when we were discussing this budget for adoption, that a 15% vacancy rate seemed extremely high to me. And that it's not a great goal to have a 15%. And so I don't think it needs to be reflected of as we fail to meet the goal of 15% vacancy rate, but that we found that in order to do the work, it was unsustainable. A 15% vacancy rate is simply unsustainable. So I view it as a positive that we have a lower vacancy rate than 15%. I know it has a budget implication. And yes, I think we have to take it into account, but I don't view it as a negative that we failed to maintain a 15% rate. So I just want to say, I view this as a positive, not a negative. So that's my first point. My second thing is that at least the vacation and sick leave accruals, from my understanding, it does not have a cash impact. I know it's accrued, but it's accrued in a similar way that capital depreciation is accrued. It's actually not cash that you're spending. So I'm fine with measuring it, but I'm not sure that vacation and sick leave accruals, I know there's an end of year value, but I'm not sure that the end of year values add up over time to money being spent by the state bar. So that's part of why I'm fine with leaving it at the end of the year. It appears to me to be more of a accounting adjustment than it is a true expenditure that we're in trouble, that depletes the bank account by this amount. So I'm fine with leaving it as is.
Tony, can I interrupt you on this one? Because I've wrestled with this as well, trying to understand this. But to your point, it is reflective, and it hits us to the tune of $3.9 million on our bottom line. And that's the thing that if your point if I'm understanding your point, that it doesn't really have a value in that regard, it is hitting us in our bottom line.
Well,
And
well,
that's what
let's
I'm still trying to understand.
Okay, let's separate the 2.3 from vacation and sick days and the 1.6 from the final payroll. That's what gets you to 3.9 that you're talking about.
Right.
But I think that they're actually very different animals. And I
Okay,
want to stick with the vacation and sick leave. Now, I'm making an assertion, but that's why Araceli is here on the call to correct my assertion or to clarify it. But it's my assertion that it's not actually money out of pocket. I do acknowledge it as a accounting adjustment requirement as an accrual, but I'm not sure that it actually comes out of pocket. So I'll pause there and let Araceli correct me.
Yeah, so let me kind of explain. This is an estimate, right? And accruals are estimates. Are we going to spend $2.3 million? I don't know, but it's our best estimate that we are making as of we're really using June numbers. Our reserve policy, the board's reserve policy, is basically current assets minus current liabilities. It's in the board manual. That's what the reserve is: current assets minus current liabilities. This portion, so whenever I'm looking at the reserve balance at year end, and wherever me and Justin and the finance team are working on our budget and trying to project what our deficit is, and not a deficit, what our fund balance is going to be, we have to think of all of the expenditures that are going to impact our working capital, current assets minus current liabilities. And basically trying to figure out what in the current assets and current liabilities, which it is the balance sheet, is going to have a cash outflow impact on the income statement. So yes, you're not wrong, Mark, that it is an accounting adjustment, but the reality is at the end of the year, when we have to assess how much vacation accrual to put on our books, that is the amount that we're saying based on all of our employees, if they essentially were to leave, this is how much money we would have to pay on a short-term basis.
Ursula, sorry to interrupt you, because when I asked you this question as well, I thought this was a percentage of the total accrual balance, not the total accrual balance, and that this percentage reflected the best estimate of the actual payout that we would experience this year. So it's not simply an accounting on the books adjustment. We expect to pay this amount out in vacation accrual payouts this year. That was my understanding of how this dollar figure was derived.
Justin, can you help me out with this one? I am pretty sure that is.
It is a percentage because
Yes,
we think
okay.
that it's going to be current is 40%. So it's 40% of all the accrual is what we do for the current year. So that goes to current liabilities. And so that's why it does impact the ending balance, but it's not the full accrual. It's just what we think we're going to spend in the current year.
By spend, we mean pay it out. It's money that is being spent.
Correct.
So Mark, because I had the same question, like, should we be including this? But if it is cash that we expect to pay out, then I think it is different than just sort of an accounting adjustment.
But is it a payout for the people who have departed the organization? That I can understand, because when someone leaves an organization, there is for state law for vacation, and my understanding is that by contract for sick days, those do get paid out. That I understand. So if you were to tell me, actually, this 2.3 million is the estimate of what the payout is for departing employees, I would understand it and just ask that it be relabeled vacation and sick day departure payouts, because then I would understand what that is, but I'm not sure that that's what it is.
It is what we anticipate just paying out to our employees, whether they're, yes, of course, if they depart, they get to take all of their vacation balance with them, but It's also current employees. So we budgeted their salary, right? And I know you and I talked, Mark,
Yes,
but what I'm saying is our actual expenditures, right? I want to propose this amendment because the actual expenditures, right? When I'm presenting every quarterly budget versus actuals, without this portion up until Q4, our actuals are going to seem lower than the budget.
I'll say one more thing before I know Donato wants to speak. Okay, so let's say you budget for an employee, okay? And you budget $100,000 for their salary, okay? And then you budget things like their taxes and health benefits and all this stuff. And you then have a full thing. You don't have a separate item for vacation, for vacation and sick days, because it's already included. You're not expected, that $100,000, you're not expected to work 52 hours a week. You're expected to work maybe 46 hours, weeks a year, weeks a year, okay? You're not expected to work 52 weeks a year. You're expected to work something more like 46 or something weeks a year. And the rest of it is covered by vacation or sick day. When you take vacation, you don't get an additional pay, you get your regular pay. You don't then, I'm taking 2 weeks vacation and then get double pay for those 2 weeks, your regular salary plus 2 weeks of vacation adder. At least that's not my understanding of how it works. I've not been in an organization that pays you an extra for taking vacation. So I'm like, if this is including employees that are taking vacation, then it feels like double counting to me.
No, the actuals are not, how can I explain this? The actuals are not capturing when we look at our budget versus actuals, the actuals are not including the vacation portion. And there's more background to that Mark, maybe I can, if you're okay with it, I can discuss with you offline. But this, again, I go back to our working capital, sorry, our reserve policy is working capital. Working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. It's our policy. Without factoring this, my projected reserve every year would be off, right? Because what the auditors do is they'll look at our audited financials at the end of the year and they'll validate your current assets minus your current liabilities. That's the working capital formula. Accruals, the short-term accruals, right, which is what we're saying we're expecting to pay, not the full accrual, just the short-term impact of any accrual is what we are expecting to incur. So without this, at the end of the year, this is going to, historically, we're going to have to do this accrual.
But Araceli, just to go to Mark's point, so let's say I make $1,000 a week, and or make $1,000 a week. So a 2-week period. 1 week I'm on vacation and 1 week I work. I still get my $2,000. Are you saying that our expenditures, our expenses do not show that $2,000 under salary? $1,000 is under like personnel expense salary, and another $1,000 shows up as vacation. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Mark, I think what she's saying is even when current employees are using their vacation, we're booking the expenses in 2 different places. So we have to book the vacation accruals that we anticipate people using, even our current employees. We have to budget that, because this is basically saying we're taking into account the way we split up the payroll costs. Part of it is going to show up as salaries, part of it as vacation. So it's not, I'm getting paid twice. I'm just kind of getting paid from 2 different buckets.
But to go to go further, and I want to get to Mr. Trejo as well, that vacation bucket, we are not accounting for. And that's why you have to do this accrual at the end of the year. Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah, we historically did not budget this, have not budgeted this.
Wow. Mr. Tony, you want to make another comment and then go to
I'm
Mr.
waiting.
Trejo? You're gonna wait?
For trustee Trejo.
Okay. Mr. Trejo, I know you were trying to get in here.
No, I wanted everyone to speak their minds, and I was trying to get in and out, making sure people finish their points. I think that the issue that I'm thinking that maybe it's helpful to view it this way. I think that you might be asking for questions regarding our cash flow as opposed to stuff that's affecting our P&L, right? That's to say, like, at the end of the day, you're still liable for these expenses. Whether you've actually paid them out is not really up to you as the employer. It's more up to the person who's actually activating these opportunities for themselves, right? At the end, you make an assessment because you're still on the hook for them. Whether they actually utilize them or not is what these accumulations do for you, right? So still on the hook, just didn't pay it that year. You may have to pay it next year, depending, again, it all depends on whatever. Either way, that's why I think to the point is that once you see, and to Leah's point, you view it on a current basis, right? So this month or this quarter, hey, these people actualize this much, and we're going to sum that up. And then at the end of the year, hey, this is how many people have actually, actualized, and this is what it looks like. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. Sometimes you're going to have a little bit of a buffer in there, but either way, you're gonna pay it. Maybe not today, but at some point, that is going to get actualized.
Correct. We are liable for those expenses. If everybody was to leave at the end of the year, that's only 40%, but
And it'll be reflected. If they don't use it, then you'll have a surplus maybe, but still, like, you're still on the hook.
right. And that's one of the challenges. At least, when I took this over a year ago, we had historically not budgeted vacation. I'm a former auditor. One of the most challenging things is to budget vacations because you have to predict what your employees' vacation spending patterns are going to be. That's where it becomes challenging, and that's probably why we have historically not, tried to budget this amount. But we can look at historical trend, and in my 2024 updated deficit spending, I'm saying let's put it in there going forward. Let's change that practice and put it in going forward so that nobody's surprised at the end of the year when they see a huge hit in expenses to the general fund.
Okay. I think I'm sufficiently clarified. I don't like the fact that we have done this historically, but I think I'm sufficiently clarified. Mark, do you want to go? Mr. Trejo want to go? Mr. Buenaventura have questions? I know I do have a few, but I want to make sure I get to the Finance Committee members.
I'll wait to see if trustee Buenaventura has anything before I go on.
Mark, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. So, there's a couple things. One is I really want to acknowledge how much better the finances are than 2.5 years ago when I joined the Finance Committee. They're much easier to understand. I think Araceli is doing an outstanding job as CFO. The budget was I felt it was a complete mess, very hard to follow. And there are some I think recommendations that Araceli made at the beginning about let's just do better planning for next year that I completely support. I don't know that I think it makes sense to include a mid-year change in the vacation and sick leave accruals and the final payroll accrual, other than to note that these are expenses that are coming. I just don't know that it makes sense to shift mid-year. I'd rather wait until next year and do it right from the start. That's my preference. I also believe that we should defer the public trust liaison. The 60,000, I know it's small, but I think it's something we can defer. I'm sorry, we got a poor phone tree. That's why we need funding. And the big piece that's missing I did have a question that and if you don't have the answer yet, I had asked the question of what's the consequence of deferring the $600,000 payment to CalPERS? Wondering if they got back to you on that.
I did pose that question to CalPERS, Mark, and as of today, as of right now, I have not received a response back.
Okay,
from
I
them.
assume they're going to say there are steep penalties, so we may be stuck with that.
Yeah, we should probably call somebody.
Okay. But here's what's missing from this is the potential additional revenue from the admission fees adjustments. And there's another fee. It has to do with fees for services. There's a name for them, I don't remember them, but we've discussed them each separately.
So the general fund fee that was approved earlier this year, those are we made the assumption in the 2024 forecast that we would get those fees approved. So that increase, most of those fees, the impact of the increase is going to be in 2024. That is reflected in what we have forecasted for 2024 general fund revenue.
Okay, for the general, but not the admission, because we haven't adopted that yet. We're still under discussion on that one.
The admissions fee revenue doesn't attrite to the general fund, and you're only reviewing general fund budget adjustments today. So that's why there's no reference to the admissions fees, but that's also correct. Mark, the board has not formally adopted the admissions fee increases. You're going to be asked to do that in September.
Okay, I will just note that my understanding is both the admission fees and you said the general fund fees,
yeah,
are in deficit situations where the fees generated do not cover the expenses. My understanding is if that is in fact accurate, it comes out of this budget here. So I do think we need to be looking at making adjustments to make both of those fee pools self-sufficient and not drawing from the general fund budget.
The proposals that the board approved for the general fund fee increases do achieve that goal, setting aside the elephant in the room, so to speak, which is the licensing fee, which we cannot on our own motion adjust. But those fees for service, we have achieved the goal of full cost recovery. There are two general fund programs that the board has not yet touched. That's the lawyer referral service program and the mandatory fee arbitration program. So you will need to take action on those. Staff has not been prepared to bring proposals forward to you yet because the programs are undergoing a redesign.
Okay.
Those two are remaining. On admissions, the board has been quite clear about the need to achieve virtually full cost recovery. We gave you an update on that at your July meeting. In September, you will get the final staff proposal. We've heard loud and clear the need to achieve full cost recovery. So you see that the way that we do that is by increasing the fees quite significantly on the admission side, but also looking to reduce expenses in order to right size the budget. So we're taking that message to heart. The general fund, I do not believe, can subsidize admissions at this point. I mean, you see where the general fund is. We just can't subsidize admissions. So we're working with that understanding in mind on the admissions side right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Tony, I apologize. One part of your comment I did not hear. And was that there was something that you felt that we should not do at this time? And I'm sorry, I missed what item that might be.
Item 5, the public trust liaison, it has to do with the phone tree.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Trejo, anything from you or further?
No, thank you. I think, no, I don't have anything further.
Mr. Buenaventura, anything from you? Okay, I do have a couple questions. Araceli, on the revenue adjustments number one, that $75,000, was that an action that the board took itself to eliminate the MCL self-study application fee? Do you know how that came about?
I am not sure, Mark. Illy, I don't know if you,
Yeah, I don't think it's actually that we eliminated the fee. I can't recall. The content itself has not been updated in some time. So I do know that there is not like a value proposition currently for the content. We have not had the staffing capacity to update that content. And so therefore, my understanding is the content is very old. So I don't know if we then therefore just took the content down. Or we determined we're going to leave very old content up, but not charge a fee because the content is so old. We can check on that. But the underlying issue is the lack of resources to update the content. So that's the real issue, and that is not something that would come to the board. It just
Right.
hasn't been updated.
Just wanted to understand that a little bit more. My second question is pursuing something that was talked about relative to the vacancy rate, and do understand that the 15% is not achievable. But I just want to remember or be refreshed on where that came from, the 15%, because I was under the impression that there historically we had reached the 15% vacancy rate, and so we did think, you know, when we made the decision relative to hiring freeze, et cetera, that we might be able to achieve that rate. I just want to get clarified on that again.
and you're right, Arnie, we had historically budgeted at least for 2022, and I think for 2021, we had budgeted around a 15% salary savings. And historically, up until the end of 2022, we had been able to achieve those salary savings. I think 2023 is the first year in a long time since I've seen at some of the numbers where that 15% rate, that the salary savings attributed to the 15% is not achievable anymore. And I think we probably are having one of the lowest vacancy rates in many, many years. Steve, I don't know if you have history prior to me joining, but I think right now is probably one of the lowest vacancy rates we've been able to achieve.
Yeah, I don't think it's accurate that we budgeted 15% historically, Arnie. I think in fact we budgeted 10%. If I recall, for 2021, we came in higher. And so we adjusted it for 2022. I believe in 2022, our vacancy rate was something like 22%. It was very high. And so we felt 15% was reasonable. In the past, it's ranged from 0%, 5%, 10%. There hasn't been like a set approach to the vacancy rate. At one point, I remember we did 7%. So I think the 15% at budget adoption was reasonable based on what we saw in 2022. It certainly is not appearing to be reasonable based on actuals to date. And to Mark's point, I think this is very positive. We've really reduced our turnover rates throughout the organization, which benefits, us and the people we serve. But here we are.
Very good. Thank you for that. And I agree, not having that churn in our staffing, I think is important. And when you have churn that high, it makes you question all sorts of other things that may be going on. So I agree that it's a good thing that we're around having that churn. Am I okay to talk about number 8, which is the trial? I'm not sure if that's something that might be subject to closed session or any of those sorts of things like that. But this one sort of struck me as new. Have we discussed this previously?
I froze for a second. Chair, I think it would be okay to speak in general terms around the cost. And if Chris Jagger is on the panel, let me see if he is. He's not. So I can answer to this at a high level because this is actually costs that are being incurred by Office of Chief Trial Counsel. There was a litigation that was initiated by Mr. Harper that pertains to claims of discriminatory treatment that they needed to retain outside counsel to be able to litigate that case because that's being handled within OCTC. And so the costs are pertaining to that particular trial. And as I understand, it is has gone through the majority of the litigation activities and it's probably in its final stages.
And so this is a cost estimate related to that litigation.
Estimate along with some expenditures.
Okay. All right. All righty. I know that I find everything that's being presented for the most part in terms of these are, we're truing up things. And Mr. Tony has reminded us, on a number of occasions during the course of some of our deliberations on this finance committee that we need to make sure that we are incorporating and including everything that we need to be including to paint a proper picture of where we are from a fiscal standpoint. And so I want to move on to the solution side of this and talk maybe just a little bit about the potential for some fund shifts. And Araceli, would you mind just sort of talking about the Client Security Fund as well as the Lawyer Assistance Program, maybe a little bit more? And I know this is something that as a board, we can't do ourselves, that we're going to need to get permission in order to do this. But obviously, the members of the Finance Committee would have to make a recommendation to the full board that this be something that we potentially pursue. And I just want to make sure the members, if they're so inclined, have a clearer understanding of what this might mean.
Sure. So it was brought up to consider whether some of the funds, right, we have the general fund and then we have, I think, 12 restricted funds that are restricted for a specific purpose. And we looked into all of those funds to see which one could potentially, we could transfer funds from if they had excess reserves, essentially. And we identified two funds. That was Lawyers Assistance Program and the Client Security Fund. However, for Lawyers Assistance Program, OGC has done a preliminary assessment and they have concluded that we definitely need legislative authorization to be able to transfer any excess funds they have to the general fund. Client Security Fund, OGC also came back with, and so this CSF, that fund is there's two sources that I guess build into that fund. One is the mandatory fee that every licensee has to pay. I think it's $40. And then there's also any debt collection efforts that attorneys that have been resigned or disbarred, when we go after them and we get collections, it's also put in part into the Client Security Fund. The portion that's for mandatory license fees, that one we would need legislative authorization to be able to to be able to transfer any of those funds. However, the portion that we do collect back from debtors, that can be transferred to the general fund. I guess that portion, just to leave it there, that portion that we get back from a collections effort from resigned or disbarred attorneys, mostly can be transferred to the general fund.
And that would be without legislative authority.
Correct.
And do we know the out of that $8.1 million, do we know how much that portion might be?
I don't know. I'd have to look, right? Because this is a balance that has built up over the years, and I'd have to figure out how much of that was collected from, how much of that reserve was collected from attorney fees versus how much of that was collected essentially from debt collection.
Gotcha. Okay. don't have a lot of great choices in front of us here. But I just, maybe just to restate, possibly for my purposes, but also for the purposes of the other board members, is that essentially the two choices I think that we have are to move forward with the budget adjustments that would either incorporate the salary savings at either 15% or incorporate it at the salary savings at 8%. And incorporating at 15% leaves us with a $3.4 million reserve rolling into next year. Incorporating it at 8% leaves us with a $420,000 reserve rolling it into next year. Is that the correct way to state this?
Right.
I
Okay.
think that's right. And I think also Mark has raised the issue of not approving the PTL expense. I would just say, you know, at your last meeting, you approved additional nights of hotel for the Jenny commissioners, which, you know, equates roughly to this amount. And this, the phone tree impacts the over, you know, 115,000 people a year who are calling the state bar, or the calls that we receive. So the scope of the impact is quite significant. So I would just kind of ask the committee to consider that on the particular issue of the phone tree.
Yeah, and Mr. Tony, I would also ask you to possibly to reconsider that item as well. We had a presentation from the public trust liaison at our July meeting, which I thought was they're doing a great job. And I'd like to try to be as helpful to them as we possibly can. And knowing where we are with our fiscal situation. But obviously, you know, I appreciate you bringing that forward, and it's something that we should consider. What's the will of the committee here? I mean, I think that we need to be true to some of the guidance that Mr. Tony has given us, and if we are operating at an 8% vacancy rate, it seems to me that it would not be in good prudence to push forward with a 15% vacancy rate, knowing that that's not a vacancy rate that we would achieve, and clearly that puts us in a very sort of precarious reserve position. You know, less than I don't even know what percentage, or a 0.4%, less than 1% in terms of an operating reserve going into the final quarter of this year. With you know, there are still unknowns and uncertainty relative to that. I would offer that we do move ahead with the scenario that would adopt the 8% reserve, or 8% vacancy rate. But I would also tack on to that, you know, going to the full board to ask for authorization for us to potentially transfer some of the funding and seek legislative approval to transfer some of the reserves from some of the other the two accounts that Araceli indicated into the general fund. Now, clearly, that would have to be something that would be discussed with legislative staff, have to be incorporated into the fee bill in order to get authorization to do that before the end of the year. So that also presents some uncertainty and an unknown, as well as what the appropriate amount potentially could be. So I don't know if other board members have thoughts or just,
I would, I'm sorry to interject. I like the way you're going through this exercise, to be honest with you. I think that it's important to give a true analysis of what's going on, right? I think that that's an essential piece. And I think that by articulating these things to our stakeholders, like we've said previously, I think only helps us into finding a solution, you know? And I think that, and that's where transparency comes in. This is what we're trying to do here. And I think, so I would agree with the order in which you're proceeding, in my view.
Very good. I do have one additional question, and that is, Araceli and Justin, when we roll into projections for 2024, and I know that that's not, you know, that's just a part of the exercise here. Does that 2024 deficit funding spending, is that also reflective though of the 1.9 million in higher revenue that you've indicated that that we are projecting?
Sorry, you mean the updated reserve?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it is.
Yes,
Okay.
for 2023, yes, it is reflective of the.
Yes, and then, but, so if I look at table 2, and I know we're talking about, and I hope I'm not conflating anything, but if I look at table 2, that adopted deficit spending of 6.5, roughly 6.6, is that, am I not thinking about this correctly, that there's 1.9 million of that?
No.
Okay. Go
No,
ahead.
so the 1.9 that I mentioned in my slides, that's for 2023. We had budgeted, I forget the amount, mid 85 million. And we are, as of our latest numbers, and most of that money is in because billing season is over. We've collected about $1.9 million more in attorney fees than we had anticipated. And actually a portion of that is also investment income that we're getting more higher interest revenue from.
Got it. All right.
So that's only 2023.
I know I just like to make sure that if there are other comments, questions, before we ask for a motion, but Mr. Tony, did I see your hand?
Yes, I really appreciate Trustee Soul, your recommendation. Here's what I would like. I would like to be able to support the proposal recommending, you know, to the board. Here's the thing I'd like us, and maybe it's as part of the note, to recognize that there are 2 categories of additional expenses. One is categories that were not anticipated and not expected when we adopted the budget, okay? Those are things like the extra legal expenses. Those are things like the phone tree breaking down that we need to get fixed. Those are things like the vacancy rate, okay? You know, that in fact it turned out that, and I liked what Leah said, greater employee satisfaction meant that we had better retention, okay? Because part of vacancy rate takes into account attrition, okay? So I think that there's a positive in, you know, and, you know, the investigation fees, you know, legal fees took more than we anticipated. I don't think there's anything negative about we're making a mid-year adjustment. We do this every mid-year, okay? The part that's tricky to me is where we have the accounting issues where the total of 3.9 million, where we want to change accounting standards and protocols mid-year. That's a different thing. That makes it look like we did bad planning. When we came up with the budget, we forgot. We forgot these categories. Or, you know, we always do it at the end. Okay, maybe we didn't forget, but we always do it at the end, and it always means we're behind because we didn't budget for it at the beginning. So to me, that's a different category of things. If we want to include it in this mid-year adjustment, I think we have to cop to that. And we have to say, hey, these we want to point out are things that we usually adjust at the end of the year. We've learned our lesson. We'll never do that again. And starting in 2024 and every year thereafter, like I believe Araceli indicated, we're going to include it at the beginning. But I just want to like not bury it and say, oh yeah, it's just another adjustment. I want to take responsibility for in the past, okay, under our previous CFOs, this is how it was always done. And our new CFO has recommended, sees this as we're creating a structural deficit every year because every year we're not anticipating an expense we know is going to happen. And we're going to fix that now, and we're going to fix it going forward. That I could be comfortable with, but I want to call it out. I just don't want to pretend like it was unexpected. It was expected. We just failed to account for it. It's okay to admit that we have a shortcoming as long as we make it clear that we are correcting that shortcoming. I just feel it's different from the, unanticipated. This was anticipated. So that's my main thing. I can support this if in the transmission of this information with the staff in particular, that we're completely transparent.
Reaction from staff at all in terms of bifurcating? I don't have a problem at all. I think it's I think it's good thinking to do it this way. So we're all, and it goes something back to Mr. Trejo. You used the word transparency earlier, and I think from a transparency standpoint, it continues this trend of us looking under the hood, us looking at everything, and making sure that all the constituencies that are engaged with their interactions with the board understand exactly what's happening to our fiscal picture.
And that's perfectly fine with me, Mark and Arnie. We can edit the agenda that we're going to put forth for the board to kind of break out the categories as you mentioned. Should be fine.
Or were you also talking about a bifurcated motion, Mark, today?
No, I don't need a bifurcated motion. All I'm asking for is an acknowledgement, and that, usually when you present someone with a budget revision, usually there are little notes to it, right? Note here, note there. I just want it to be part of the notes.
Okay.
Okay, the narrative, the budget narrative, if you will. That's all.
Clearly, we have not talked about the issue of the fee increase, and I don't want to belabor this committee meeting with trying to get into the details of pursuing a fee increase. But I am comfortable with how this item is presented, in the fact that showing that if we were just to follow what the state auditor has said, it would be insufficient to get us to where it is that we need to that we need to be, and that we, in terms of a plan, the only thing I additionally that I would offer is that we need to ensure the fact that we put forward to our legislative constituents the importance and the need for a fee increase, and some range of what that fee increase would need to be in order to properly sort of deal with our financial picture moving forward, either with the sale of the building or without the sale of the building. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Tony, you want to put forward a motion here, unless I see other comments from board members?
I'd be happy to. I move that the Finance Committee recommends that the board adopt the budget amendments as presented by the CFO.
At the
Yeah,
8%.
this will be fine, yes.
With the 8%, because that's a little different than as presented by the CFO.
Yeah, that 8% mark. I mean,
Sure, if you, I'm happy for that friendly amendment if you believe it makes it more explicit. I presumed that because a budget is just a financial representation, I just thought that would be part of the budget narrative, the notes. We can't just send this without notes. That's why we have these notes, so that when we are approving an increase in the line item of staff salaries, it seems to me that it implies that what's behind it is that it's taking into account the 8% rather than the 15. That's why I didn't think it was necessary. I thought it was part of the narrative that explains what these numbers mean, like we have explanations for all the others.
I personally think we need it because it was presented as kind of two different categories in table 1 and in the fiscal impact section. The fiscal impact of the amendments is stated to be 4.7 million, which does not reflect the modification to reduce the vacancy rate from 15 to 8. So I think this would be cleaner. Presented this date, recommends that the Board of Trustees approve the 2023 proposed budget amendment
With the salary adjustment?
to include, including the adjustment in the budgeted vacancy rate from 15 to 8%.
That's fine with me, of course.
So the only other thing that I would add to that, and it could be another be it resolved clause, was that we would also recommend that we pursue the possibility of transferring funds from appropriate accounts into the general fund. And that could be a separate resolve clause, but I do, or maybe it doesn't need to be in the motion, but it's just something that we as a committee I want to make sure that there's an action coming out of this discussion that we will at least try to see if legislatively that's acceptable.
We could do it a couple ways. There could be a further resolved that the Finance Committee recommends that the Board of Trustees approve a modification to the State Bar's 2024 legislative priorities, or to the State Bar's legislative priorities to authorize the State Bar to make fund transfers as appropriate, because that's the vehicle for doing the proposed legislative changes, and the legislative priorities are approved by the board. So we could do it that way, Arnie. The Office of General Counsel has identified a sort of a narrow set of transfer that we can effectuate on our own motion without legislative approval. So the Finance Committee could also direct staff to pursue that, although we would definitely need to consult with legislative staff at a minimum before we took that action, I would suggest, even if we don't need their approval.
Right.
So
I like the way you constructed it in the former, Leah.
okay,
May,
let me try. Go ahead, Mark.
may I request that we do that as a separate motion, because it's a little different from the budget revisions, and we may want to include other we may want to add a couple other thoughts to that.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that, unless
I'm happy with the motion as written. I'm happy to be recorded as moving this agenda item.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Tony moves, Mr. Buenaventura seconds. I only see Luis. Is Tinny still on? I just want to make sure we call the roll. There, I see you now, Tinny. You didn't
Sure.
scroll. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Buenaventura,
Aye.
Good, absent. Tony,
Aye.
Trejo,
Aye.
Sewell,
I'm an aye.
4 ayes, 0 nays. The motion carries.
Very good. Okay. So let's discuss this notion of trying to get the seeking legislative authority to do the fund transfer. working through that. Mark, did you have other sort of thoughts there as well as other places that we should be looking? Is that your thought?
Well, here's my question, and Leah would have a better sense. I'm trying to get some feedback from Leah on this thing in my head, which is it better to have this as a very specific thing request, or is it better to have something more general, asking the staff to explore a variety of options with the legislative staff, the legislature, to resolve the the structural budget deficit or something like that. What I'm concerned about is, because we're kind of getting close to the 11th hour here, that we, and certainly we're not unlikely to have another board meeting before the September board meeting when things are closed. I'm wondering whether we should kind of provide a little bit wider range of authority, rather than only point to one single one. That's my question. I don't know what your thought is about that, Leah, but I'm trying to do this in a way that actually gives the staff a little bit of flexibility.
I think that is fine. So I think maybe, and also to make sure we're appropriately connecting this to the 2023 budget amendments, which is what is agendized for today.
That's
I
right.
think what we should say is further resolve that the Finance Committee recommends, comma, in light of, if you can add that to me, recommends, comma, in light of the 2023 recommended budget amendments, something like this, comma, that the Board of Trustees amend its legislature to include provisions allowing state bar to access client security fund, and at the end, and just maybe at the very end, just say, and authorizes staff to pursue all other options for addressing the projected budget deficit arising from the 2023 budget amendments. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
Would it be okay if I make a suggestion? Because as I'm hearing this, you'd like this to be somehow implemented as part of the 2023 recommended budget amendment, if I'm correct. If so, I would say not in light of, but as part of the recommended budget amendments. So that whatever the budget amendment is going to be, assuming for those funds that we are able to transfer without legislative priorities, we could work on that after conversations with legislative staff, but then pursue it and open the door to having conversations on amendments. Because there is, as I understood the discussion, I understood it to be as part of the amended budget, correct? Okay.
My only other suggestion is to make it clear there's a separate motion, so it becomes resolved rather than further, and you put the little preamble in front of it that makes it like another motion. There you go.
And then amendments at the end instead of amendment, yeah.
Good.
Okay, folks comfortable with this? just so I'm clear, and hopefully this motion will pass, when this is passed, this now becomes a part of the legislative liaison team's work in order to pursue this with legislative staff and try to get this into the whatever we come up with into the fee bill. Is that how this proceeds?
No, what is going to happen, and this I think is a good time for me to clarify some confusion I created with the agenda here today. The next thing that's going to happen is on the 10th, we are either holding a board meeting or an executive committee meeting. Both are noticed at the same time. We have quorum challenges at this point with a full board meeting. On the 10th, the board is going to receive the finance committee recommendations. And the board will be asked to approve them. Now they're going to be asked to approve two things: the 2023 budget amendments and the modification to include this modification of the legislative priorities to authorize advocacy to use the excess funds as noted, and et cetera, as outlined in this second resolution. So this has to be approved by either the board or XCOM on the 10th for it to be officially incorporated into our legislative priorities. What's going to happen after this meeting is we as a staff team will modify the agenda item posted for the finance committee to reflect what you actually decided on, and that's going to be posted for the 10th.
Okay.
And I wanted to clean up the confusion that I really created around what we're doing here, because at one point, you have this annotation in the agenda item that says we suggest that separate action was needed to amend the 2024 budget, and that wasn't noticed, so you weren't going to be able to do it. That was all incorrect on my part. Only the 2023 budget has been adopted by the Board of Trustees. The 2023 budget includes a 2024 projection. So when you're making changes to the 2023 budget, you are able to make changes to the 2024 projection because it is considered one and the same document. No separate action is needed on 2024. So I just want to clarify, you're not asked to do it today, nor is either the board or XCOM going to be asked to take separate action on the 2024 budget.
Very good. Thank you for that, Leah. I'm ready to entertain a motion.
I'm happy to move this motion.
Very good. I need a second.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Tony moves, Mr. Buenaventura seconds. And Tinny, can I get you to call the roll on this motion, please?
Yes, Buenaventura,
Aye.
Good, not present. Tony,
Aye.
Trejo,
Aye.
Sewell.
Aye.
4 ayes, 0 nays. This motion carries.
Very good. I believe that is all the work we had before us today as a finance committee. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
All right. I just want to thank the members and the staff for their participation. I believe this is a very, very sort of tough but detailed discussion of the board's current sort of financial situation. I want to thank Mr. Buenaventura again for his participation. I know he's probably juggling two things simultaneously. Although, Mr. Buenaventura, did I see your hand?
No, I just wanted to say hi. Thank you. You're welcome.
And as I mentioned, I think a little bit earlier, I am not going to be in our discussion on the 10th, but I would just ask the committee members to continue to keep some of my sentiments in mind as you move forward. And I just want to thank you for your good work today. I think there are a number of avenues for us to continue to pursue. There's still a fair amount of uncertainty out there, but I think the progress that we're making, at least trying in terms of trying to be transparent and trying to deal with a financial picture that is not the greatest in the world, has been solid. So I just want to acknowledge that, recognize all you and appreciate you for your work in this endeavor. So with that, unless anyone else has any comments, I think we probably can adjourn. Any other comments? Thank you so much.
All right,
Right.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.